Hi, Alexis.
Hello, Dr. Rachel. How are you today?
I am really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm also well, thanks. Looking forward to today's topic on facing our feelings, which is relevant, of course, to all of us being human beings with human feelings. And really interested in what it is to face our feelings, why it's important to us, including what are the risks if we choose not to face our feelings. And then I'd love to close with how you recommend we face our feelings. If you've got any practical tips for us to walk away with, I think that would be really valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is, thank you for that great introduction. Such a big topic, right? It's huge, actually. And, back in the 80s and 90s, a field that was really popular was stress management, how to manage our stress. Nowadays, we'd probably call it self-regulation or emotional regulation. And so it's absolutely relevant in terms of how we manage stress. It's relevant in terms of how we manage and treat trauma. It's relevant in terms of how we manage ourselves moment by moment and how we interact with and manage our relationships. So it's, and also, our health, our physical and mental health is affected by our emotions. So there's really no areas of our life when you think about it that aren't affected by our emotional feelings. So it's good to, understand and recognize feelings. This emotional literacy that you and I often talk about with regards to needs-based communication, which includes and involves naming feelings. I can't say enough about how important it is to be able to recognize and name, somehow or other, describe, put into words our feelings so that we can take responsibility for them. And then we can use and understand them, figure out what they mean and how they could be utilized to our benefit, perhaps. Yeah.
That's very interesting to me because I think for years I struggled with emotions to even see that they had value. And it's only been really quite recently that there's been a shift in the relationship to emotions. Would you like to just tell us a little bit more about the value of our feelings?
Well, as anyone who's listened to us before would know, that we like to help people to use an awareness of their feelings to understand what it is that they might be wanting or needing or valuing, or, even longing for. Can use even stronger language, because our feelings are data, and the data might be that we're wanting something and we're not getting it. And it's very difficult to take action in our lives and have agency if we don't know what we want or what we care about. So feelings help us figure out what we want and what we care about. And so I think most of us know this intuitively, because if we're hungry, we want food, and if we're tired, we want sleep. But to learn that if we're, confused, we need understanding, and if we're lonely, we need connection, and if we're isolated, we need community, that we don't get taught this stuff in schools. So, and we should be, in my opinion, and I don't say should very often, that, our emotions are data, and if we repress them and ignore them, it's hard to repress our feelings, but we can do it. Our system is designed to be able to, for our benefit, temporarily repress emotions so that we can function. The only problem is that many of us have applied a short-term survival mechanism in the long run, like repression and avoidance and denial. And then we, face problems down the line, as we all know.
Yeah. I love that you've raised that. Yes, I think the repression is a really fascinating topic, and why repression takes place is particularly intriguing to me. We all have friends or family members who we can tell have an emotion building, and for whatever reason seem unable to allow for it, seem unable to make space for it or even acknowledge it. Why, in your opinion, does emotional repression take place?
Well, I mean, all of us do it. Every single one of us has done it to some degree or another.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of a child, just think of a typical child who, in fact, a client told me a story the other day. I won't identify anything, but, and it was a story from her adolescence. And the story was simply this. She was 14 or 15. She was in a cafe with her mother, and she loves her mother very dearly, but one of the things her mother does that she doesn't like is her mother criticizes people's bodies and their weight. She saw an overweight lady eating chips, and she remarked to her daughter, my client, that woman shouldn't be eating chips. And my client, this was many years ago, she said to her mother, well, you don't know, this might just be a once a month treat for her, or, Mum, you don't know anything about her. So this 14-year-old girl is trying to kind of bring a different thought or perspective to the situation, because she was feeling sad that, after hearing her mother criticize, and her mother said, oh, you're too nice. Now, this is a pretty mundane story. The teenager expresses a different opinion and the mother squashes it down. You're too nice. And my client said that was one of the many moments where I learned that it wasn't okay for me to have a different reality to my mother's reality. Now, all of us had some experience of this growing up with our parents or with our teachers, where our reality, so our feelings, our thoughts, our needs were not allowed to be expressed. And we might have learned this quite young, at 3 or 4 years of age, that to express our needs, our thoughts, our feelings would not be welcome, that it would meet with some sort of either being ignored at best or squashed down and repressed, or even punished. Some of my clients say how much they were punished for having, feelings of anger. Like kids get angry, they have a protest, and then maybe they get physical punishment for that. So our systems are designed, because we're so interdependent on each other and we need each other for survival. Our nervous systems have evolved that we can shut down those feelings and shut down to our needs early in life. And then, like anything, our nervous system gets into patterns, and those patterns of repression just become our new normal, to just become what happens. So, so there are some emotions that we may have had to repress as children. In some families, anger was not allowed. In some families, sadness was not allowed, or fear was not allowed. And so it's good to kind of think back to your own family of origin and really contemplate what feelings were okay in my family and what feelings weren't really okay. That'll give you some clues as to which ones you've repressed.
Good question. Which feelings in my family were okay and which were not? It's a really, valuable one. So what do you find is the difficulty? What are the risks if we don't feel our feelings? What's the worst case scenario? And what happens to those feelings that do get repressed?
Well, there's quite a few things that our system will do with feelings if we don't, if we've banished some of them and deemed them to be bad feelings. We can end up with toxic positivity. We deny our feelings by trying to think positive all the time. This sort of spiritual bypass. We see that sometimes where people, want to rise above their difficult feelings like an aeroplane. But it's a kind of dissociation or a denial of the full range of human emotions. Or we may project our difficult feelings if we don't own them or welcome them. And we may get really, really fixated on criticizing other people, or it could come out in terms of political or religious zeal. And for other people, if their feelings have nowhere else to go, they could become symptoms. I've got clients who came to me because they were having panic attacks or depression. And then as we work together, or physical illnesses, you see this all the time in your work, Alexis, this repression of emotions causes them to go underground and then express themselves in disguise. And so, you know, it can come at quite a cost to our physical, mental, and social health.
Yeah, that's interesting. As you're talking, Rachel, I'm thinking of a number of clients who seem to have difficulty accessing their own wants. And, you know, particularly, you know, during adolescence, you mentioned adolescence earlier, but, you know, I'm seeing a number of adolescent clients who seem to be either projecting anger onto authority, but even this kind of absence of connection with their own sense of agency, and coupled with that, a difficult relationship with their bodies. I can't help but wonder if the two go hand in hand. Do you have any thoughts on the relationship that we have with our feelings in relation to the relationship with our bodies?
In terms of, you know, if we are repressing anger or fear or grief, perhaps, you know, we can, those repressed feelings will often, not always, but often turn into thoughts. They'll turn into perceptions and beliefs. So unprocessed negative, in inverted commas, feelings can turn into negative beliefs and perceptions, if not about others, then very often about ourselves, including our bodies. Yeah, I absolutely. And that brings me to another point that I want to really, that just seems so important to me that I make on this particular live stream. That is, and I know that our Jungian friends mentioned this somewhere in their episode on feelings, that we live in a culture now where we are asking children and young people and everybody, you know, so many people have a therapist now, and we're talking about feelings more and validating feelings more. But I think we get really confused between thoughts and feelings, or perceptions and feelings.
Interesting.
Because although all of our feelings are valid, not all of our perceptions are valid. In fact, many times our perceptions are not valid, and we need to be careful not to accidentally validate our own or others' perceptions when what we really want to do is validate feelings. I can't say enough about how important this is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the difference then? How do you help people to distinguish between thoughts and feelings?
So people, I mean, we go into this in NVC, as you know, people say things like, I feel as though. I mean, I've said it too. So we need to just catch ourselves. Or I feel that. Or I feel as if, you know, I feel as if he doesn't like me. That's a perception. I feel as if they think I'm not good at my job. That's a perception. So anytime you hear yourself saying, I feel that, or I feel like, or as if, that's definitely a perception. The feelings are usually one, maybe two words. Hence, we give out the feelings list. You know, and it can be tricky. I still struggle with this. I look at the feelings list, and just to get it down to one word or a couple of words when my mind wants to go into perception and interpretation, this is tricky. One of the areas I work with young people is gender dysphoria. It's a very, very controversial area to work in as a psychologist or a medical practitioner. And one of the things I see is teenagers will say things like, I feel like I've been born in the wrong body. And they'll get validation and affirmation for this feeling. And the rhetoric will be, we've got to validate people's feelings, young people's feelings. And that's not a feeling to me. A perception. You know, I feel like my next door neighbor hates me. You know, it's just, but this is what we do as a culture, and this is the tendency of the mind, is to confuse thoughts and feelings. I hope that gives some clarification.
Yeah. Well, from what you have shared through NVC, there's a question that's been really helpful in distinguishing an assessment or a judgment from a fact. And that is really simply the question, can we all agree on this? Can we all agree on this as a fact? I mean, that is separate to a feeling. And I agree, there's a whole new value in experiencing our feeling, but that can be a really helpful starting point. Can we all agree on this as a fact? That'll help me to separate my own assessment of it, my own judgment, from the matter of fact.
Yeah, that's definitely as an extremely useful question in interpersonal conflict. When we've got intrapersonal conflict, so just conflict going on inside ourselves, then I think we need to ask ourselves a simple question like, is it true, and can I absolutely know it's true? So perhaps my boss has given me a funny look at work one day, or said something, and I go home from work and I think, oh, my boss thinks I'm no good at my job. I'm incompetent. I feel like he doesn't like me. I feel like she thinks I'm incompetent. Then being, that's not something that we can agree on with ourselves in the absence of hard and fast data. Then we're back to the old cognitive behavior technique of asking yourself, what's the evidence? Do I know this for sure? And, what can I do to find out for sure? And that's called emotional reasoning in cognitive therapy. I have an emotion, I filter my thinking through it, and then I'm doing emotional reasoning. We do it all the time, but once you're aware of it, you can step back a bit and decide whether you even agree with yourself.
So I'm interested to drop a little bit down into the direct experience of emotional regulation, because I think it's very easy to get quite analytical about our thoughts, and there's a kind of a cyclic effect I find with thinking, and that there's something very new that I find in clinical practice when my clients do drop into an experiential state.
Yes.
And I think this is what you were alluding to earlier.
Yes.
And my experience is that we can't regulate our emotions theoretically. We might use a theory in order to understand how to do it, but just like connection, we can't do it on a page. We can't do it through theory. It has to be an embodied experiential practice.
Absolutely. And it's funny when you read articles about emotional intelligence, or you can read articles about emotional regulation or somatic experiencing, which is what we're going to talk about next. And you're still reading an article thinking with your intellectual mind. And so the menu is not the meal. Do you know what I mean? And be careful not to identify with the menu, because it won't satisfy you like the meal will.
That's a great analogy, yes. And this is also where meditation, I think, is something you and I both agree on as a way of applying our theory, implementing and actually grounding our theories.
Absolutely.
So,
that's right.
How do you recommend clients, or do you have a particular practice you would like to share today, Rachel?
Yeah, I'd like to say a couple more things and then share a practice. Mia's asked about anger. Anger is a big one that gets repressed by many of us. I agree with you, Mia. For me, that's been one of the biggest emotions that I've learned to repress, and I'm sure a lot of women and human beings can relate to that one. As a child, when we got angry, we sometimes got in big trouble, and we felt guilty about feeling angry. So I often differentiate between getting angry, which is being aggressive, and feeling our anger. And sitting with anger is a really tricky one. So if anger's up for you today, then in a minute when we do this mindfulness on the body, on the experience directly of feelings, then I invite you to sit with your anger, because I agree with you, Mia, anger is a big one. And before we can listen to it fully and let it tell us what it has to say about our needs, we actually need to sit with it, which is the meditation thing you spoke about. And the process, although I have to talk you through it with words, like what we're talking about here is beyond the verbal cognitive processes, going down to the level of the nervous system and our attentional system. So we're going to work at paying attention, putting our attention onto our inner experience, which is also called introception. Introception being our ability to sense what's going on inside. Yeah.
Good, good. Let's have a quick look as to whether there's any other questions or comments.
Experience, which is also called. There's always a bit of a lag on these live streams, I notice.
Yeah, so if you do have any questions for Dr. Rachel, please feel free to post them now. If there's any particular emotions that you're experiencing, it's a good time to bring that into the practice. So Mia, fantastic. Thank you for raising anger. I'm sure there'll be many people who can relate to that.
Yeah.
Grief is another one, I think, that a lot of people haven't really learned. I know that I didn't learn and my family didn't learn to grieve. We had to, it was a deliberate thing that I've needed to drop into.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. And I've got a really quick story that's interesting. Last week, I ran a workshop on emotional intelligence with a group of professionals who are mostly men. And part of the workshop involved me putting up slides, PowerPoint slides with different facial expressions.
Oh, yeah.
It was a bit of a game. People, needed to guess what the emotion being expressed on the face was. Interestingly, of all the facial expressions, the one that people struggled with the most was sadness, grief. So they saw I had a couple of examples of grief or sadness as a facial expression, and people were saying, he's tired, he's exhausted.
Oh, wow.
But I happen to know, because this is from one of the EI tests that I use, in psychometric assessment, that the answer is sadness or grief, but they didn't get it. They actually didn't get it. They kept saying exhausted, tired, bored. And when I said it's grief, it's sadness, they went, oh yeah. I took that. My theory was that we're not good as a culture with grief and sadness. And so we even have trouble recognizing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So interesting.
Or that it comes out in different ways.
And it comes out in different ways, like shame, like anger. So if you're sitting at the moment with guilt or shame, if you're sitting at the moment with some bit of anger or with sadness and grief or with fear and anxiety, let yourself bring that into your mind now. And we might go into, if it's okay with you, Alexis, a bit of an exercise.
That would be superb. Special hello to Kirsten, who is watching remotely. Would you like to run, or would you like me to run it? What's your preference?
I have an exercise ready to go.
Great, beautiful.
So I just invite everybody to either lower your gaze, because all you need to do is listen to my voice, or close your eyes, and to simply relax, breathe, and focus your attention now on the present moment experiencing. Noticing what arises in your present moment experience. Put your attention on being here now as your primary point of focus. And notice and identify your thoughts, any images or stories that come into your mind that connect with this emotion that you're sitting with. As I said, the mind can dominate with thoughts and perceptions, and that's okay. Just notice what thoughts come in. And notice and identify any emotional feelings. Maybe it's sadness. Maybe it is anger and rage. Maybe it's anxiety or fear. Maybe it's contentment or gratitude. None of these are good or bad. Just let them be as they are. And notice and identify any sensations related to these feelings. Any tightness, any heaviness, any constriction, any pain, any tingling, any tension, any heat or any cold. And taking a slower, deeper breath now, notice and identify any needs that you might have in this experience. Any longings, any sense of what matters in this for you. And now notice that all of your experiencing is in your awareness. Your awareness contains all of your experience, your needs and values, your physical sensations, your emotional feelings, and your thoughts and perceptions. And bring your attention to the observing awareness, your pure awareness of all of this. Know that you have this ability to be the observer of your experiencing. You get to have some say over where your attention goes to. And now bring your attention back to the content in the form of your experiencing. Noticing this feeling that's in you, or may no longer be so charged, may have relaxed itself. And just know that you can sit with and tolerate and welcome and even embrace everything that arises inside of you. Everything that arises inside of you is allowed to be there. Absolutely everything in your inner experiencing is admissible. It's not dangerous. We don't have to act on it. We can simply feel it all. And taking another slow, deep breath, slowly bringing your attention back towards the outside, listening to the sounds around you. And when you're ready, you can come back fully to the room where you find yourself. Open your eyes and return your attention to the present moment with us. And if anyone's still with us and has attempted to do this exercise, I wonder if you could put something in the comments about what that was like to do that. And as you type your comments, I'm just going to check if there are any comments already.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, I love the reminder that everything is permissible, that everything in the experience is allowed. So it helps me to remember that even that part of myself that I'm not aware of until I stop is welcome.
Yes. Very beautiful point.
Yeah. So we are doing very well for time today. There is a comment from Sarah on how to know the difference between repression and just not having strong feelings.
It's a great question. Yeah. I think that the tricky thing about denial or repression is that the nature of it is unconscious. So it's been my personal experience that when strong feelings arise and take me by surprise, that's how I know I've been repressing them. When I was repressing them or they were unconscious, meaning not conscious, well, they weren't conscious. And so I didn't know they were there until they surfaced and showed themselves. And it can be that simple thing of you think you're okay and somebody says, but how are you really? How are you going? And they mean it. Or we slow down in meditation or yoga, and maybe sometimes something comes to the surface that we just didn't know was there, and we can't force it. And so it's a great question because it's tricky to know if we've got some unprocessed feelings, if they're unconscious, we're not feeling them. And it's okay. I guess what I want to say, Sarah, is that if we aren't experiencing strong feelings, that's also okay. I trust that the unconscious and the body is intelligent enough that when we're ready and the situation is right, they will surface when the conditions are okay. And we can create those conditions as well by going to therapy, by talking to people we trust, by meditating and other things. You know, we can create the conditions so that we can be welcoming of strong feelings if they choose to show themselves. But they kind of have a life of their own very often. That's just my thoughts. What do you think, Alexis?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's a lovely reminder that just a safe space can allow it to come up. And the other aspect of it that I think is worth mentioning is that we're having feelings all the time, and whether it's a numb feeling or even, potentially flat feeling or a shut off or a disconnected feeling, these are still feelings.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's just a matter of acknowledging it as a feeling, and there's no end to the number of feelings that we have access to. So
I'm so glad you said that because I've many times found myself saying that to clients. Okay, so you're feeling numb or you're feeling empty or some similar word, and I say, let's just go into that. Locate that in your system. How do you know you're feeling numb? And they can tell me anything. Oh, it's in my head. Great. As you said to me recently, Alexis, the head is part of the body. Okay, so it's in your head. Great. Wherever it is, they must know they're feeling numb somehow. How do you know you're feeling numb? Let's just start there, because there are layers. Feelings are like, I'm thinking of that scene from Shrek where he's talking about the parfait. Sometimes we're like a parfait, if you don't know what a parfait is, it's a dessert with layers, there's layers and layers. And the first layer might be a kind of numbing and a kind of deadening or a flatness, but it's not the deepest layer. And so we just be gentle and take it slow and see if we can, dive in to the layers slowly. I mean, I loved the analogy in the podcast you and I listened to about the ornithologists who quietly go into the forest so as not to scare the birds. They want to see the birds in the forest. They have to be very quiet and very slow, or the birds fly away. Our emotions are quite shy sometimes, or quite sensitive. They'll go away if we're too forceful. So, slowing down. And I love what Nicholas has said here about that meditation we just did. It feels like it's leaving out the ego when you become the observer. And I absolutely agree. Our observing self is quite distinct from our egoic self. Hence why this sort of practice helps us. Our ego actually protects us from difficult feelings. And that's the function of the ego, to explain and justify and defend and judge and analyze and all those things that sometimes can be very functional sometimes. And then, but in doing so, it actually can defend us against our feelings, making it harder to feel them. But this observing self helps us go some other place that's not ego, and and really drop in, as you say, Alexis.
I love that you used the word locate earlier, and that's been my experience in dropping out of the ego. I locate, and this may be helpful for some of you who are listening, but when you locate it, and this is why psychotherapists now more often than not are asking, where do you experience that in your body?
Yeah.
Because after all, everything we experience is, as you described in our meditation, this is all we've got. So everything can be located in some capacity. And that, for me, has allowed me to distance myself from the feeling enough that I can experience it without being too caught in it. And the Buddha even says that suffering is caused by our over-identification, and that to separate from is the key to liberation, to freedom from suffering. And it really is that, it really can be that manual, physical. So to locate, I think, has been essential for my emotional regulation.
Yeah.
And, hopefully you guys...
It absolutely is. If we can't locate it in our system and go to it with our attention and allow it, permit ourselves to feel, permission to feel. There's a great book called Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett. And actually, I'll put a few book recommendations in the comments, some recent books I've read on emotional intelligence. I'll put them in the comments in a minute. And a good article on the topic as well from Psychology Today. But if we can't locate it and go into it, then we're still in the verbal cognitive capacities of the mind, which we need those capacities. But if we just only live there, then we can't face our feelings, which is the topic of today.
So Mia mentions that it was easy to do the meditation when things are calm, but she's concerned she won't have the same ability when not calm.
And hence why we need to practice when we're a 5 out of 10, so that we get better and better at doing it when we're 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. And forgive yourself for not always being able to do this. Mia also says she liked that I said at our last practice group, which we can talk about in a sec, that I mentioned about dropping the expectation of arriving. My memory was that I said to the group, don't have the delusion that you ever arrive when it comes to this inner work, and dust off your hands and say, I'm done now, I'm enlightened. I don't think that happens. I don't think that's even what enlightenment is. She said it's helped her this past week release the expectation of arriving, because arriving is just the beginning. That's right. Let's just arrive in our experience and see that there is no end point to doing that. So thank you for saying that, Mia.
And Libby, and I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning, Libby said the same thing, that comment was very meaningful for her also.
Good.
And just going back a moment, Mia, when feelings are strong, I find is a particularly valuable time. That's been a deliberate practice of mine, when I have a feeling, to remove myself from distractions, even if it's for 2 to 5 minutes.
Yes.
And to identify what it is, where it's situated, and just be okay in myself, find my point of stability while the feelings are continuing to do their feeling thing. And that has been a huge benefit to me while I'm feeling, not just in a calm space.
Yes, absolutely. That's about creating the right conditions for you to be able to feel your feelings. Because sometimes, the classic example I hear about all the time is somebody's lost a loved one and they have to organize a funeral, or they've had an accident and they've got to get to the, the logistics of it, the insurance, whatever, getting a hire car. We need to be able to not feel our feelings sometimes, or not be overwhelmed by them sometimes.
Yeah.
We have to just do the practical tasks of life. So this repression thing has a function. It has its purpose. Many people say, after the funeral, I fell apart. Or once I submitted that thesis, then I got sick and fell apart. So, sometimes the conditions aren't right for us to be able to process feelings. But at other times, like you've suggested, Alexis, we could actually create the conditions. We can take ourselves away. We can go to a safe place or a safe person. We can meditate or do some relaxation and create those conditions in order that we can face our feelings.
Yes. And that's my understanding of the word regulation, that I've got some sense of control, some sense of management. I can move towards it, welcome it to its fullest extent, and I can also just park it when I need to focus on what's right at hand. That to me is the ability to regulate, to be able to sit right across that spectrum according to what's appropriate and what I need in that given moment.
Exactly. That is a big part of why the word regulation is the best word. Yes, thank you for saying that. Okay, I wonder if we should wrap up and tell people about our next practice group.
Please, yes. Thank you guys for watching. A pleasure to have you all with us. And we meet at the last Sunday of the month in the flesh. And it's something quite unique to meet in person. And we share a practice together. We start with a meditation, and it's an incredibly inclusive group. We practice non-violent communication together. So Rachel gives us a discussion, a little bit of theory, and then we sit facing each other in what's known as a dyad, which is a very simple practice, essentially of listening without the need to respond. And we have had, in fact, some questions this week about whether you can come and just be in your own space. And my response to that is, yes, there's ways to do all of the exercises as a journaling exercise, but essentially the communication starts with ourselves. And I have also found, and this has really been a very powerful revelation for me through our work together, is that there's an aspect of mental wellness that is dependent upon our interrelational skills, and we can only go so far relating to ourselves. So thankfully the group is very, very warm and very, very open, and the space is completely safe. So we hope that even if you do feel that you're going out on a limb, that you can sit in dyad with somebody else. And then we always close with a brief meditation. And so it's just 2 hours, 9:30 to 11:30 here at the Graceful Bowls Club. And it's by gold coin donation, so it's entirely accessible. No matter what your circumstances, we would love you to come along and give it a go.
Absolutely. And I just had the thought, people could also ask us at the start if they wanted to pair up with either you or me because they feel comfortable and familiar. That's another option. People could approach us at the start to make that request.
Great point.
Yeah.
And if I may, there is also one other opportunity to meet in person.
Yes.
Next Saturday, that's the 9th of April, I'll be speaking following the Gottman. There's a video that we'll be watching together on making relationships work. This is part of a meetup group that I've been involved with. So if you're happy for me to post that too, Rachel, I'll put that link below.
Okay, that sounds excellent. So 24th of April is our next practice group. Sunday, April 24 at 9:30 a.m. Details on your website and my website. All right, I'd better run. Thank you so much, Alexis, and everybody who tuned in.
Thank you for sharing your insight, Dr. Rachel, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes, see everybody then.
Okay.
Bye for now.